The career of Dijonai Carrington is rapidly collapsing in real time. We are not discussing a gradual deterioration over a few seasons. We are discussing a whole implosion that took place in just 1 week. According to the most recent reports going around the WNBA and the sports industry, her big sponsorship deals are vanishing after one hard foul, one rash social media post, and numerous unsuccessful explanations. If you appreciate this content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 85% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's free and only takes a second, but it means the world to us. So, did you subscribe already?
Great.
Thank you so much for your support. Now back to the video.
Dijonai Carrington is looking around the room like, oh my God, I've never been in this much fire. I mean, it's getting so bad that now her endorsements are potentially about to pull out on representing Dijonai Carrington.
Right now, that's the picture. A young athlete in the middle of her career is witnessing the collapse of everything she has established, both on and off the court, in terms of sponsorships and brand value. One of her biggest collaborators, Reebok Music, is reportedly cutting connections.
Reebok is reportedly dropping their endorsement for Dijonai Carrington after she attacked Sophie Cunningham. Let's go.
This is when things start to get interesting. This is where it turns into a narrative about more than a single player's bad decision-making. The report that is now making the rounds claims that Reebok isn't simply dropping Carrington. They are shifting their focus to another Indiana Fever player who is more marketable and hasn't made rash choices that damage her reputation. This season, there has been a lot of drama and debate around the arrival of Caitlin Clark on the Fever, the same player whose team is now profiting from the disastrous mistaken judgment of another player. This is the tale of how a single poor play may snowball into a career-altering disaster due to a player's own choices. We must first comprehend who she is and what she built before discussing the collapse. Carrington, a promising defensive player, was selected in the WNBA draft. She wasn't a great scorer because that wasn't her style, but she was a reliable rotation player who could produce on both ends of the court. She entered the league with agility, defensive tenacity, and the kind of competitive fire that coaches admire. She had landed sponsorship deals, which was more significant. Something about her caught Reebok's attention. They perceived possibilities. They recognized a young, athletic, marketable player with the potential to develop into a larger brand. Endorsement contracts are essential for professional athletes. They frequently reflect an income that is equal to or greater than their actual wage. Particularly in the WNBA, where salaries are significantly lower than in the NBA, sponsorships can make the difference between stable and unstable finances. Carrington had begun constructing that safety. She was on a steady, long-term professional trajectory rather than a superstar trajectory. She was improving on the court and carefully maintaining her off-court brand, as is expected of professional athletes. Then, everything changed in an instant. The Chicago Sky versus the Indiana Fever was a primetime basketball game that was broadcast nationally. A viewing audience. A colleague in the women's basketball department and a player for the Fever, Sophie Cunningham, took off on a fast break, an easy opportunity, and a moment when the game was up for grabs. Carrington then appeared from behind. Defensive positioning was not the foul. Two players battling for the ball did not collide. It was an intentional, egregious, excessive contact that had nothing to do with basketball. Carrington had no intention of blocking the shot. She wasn't attempting to challenge the layup. She was attempting to physically stop Cunningham by striking him in the head and neck. That isn't basketball. That isn't the level of competition. That is a decision. And the officials acknowledged it as such. Flagrant foul penalty number 2, automatic ejection, and instant removal from the game.
Did y'all see what happened when this young lady got ejected from a WNBA game the other day for a flagrant foul on Sophie Cunningham? She mugged her. Damn near came across like decapitating her, for crying out loud. That was definitely a hard foul.
The national media did not refrain. They described it as excessive, needless, hazardous. Music, a foul that may have resulted in catastrophic harm, and neither a competitive play nor a difficult playing moment. Cunningham fell hard. The video quickly gained popularity. Millions of people had seen the play in a matter of minutes. The commentary had contributed. It was a national conversation. Carrington now had to decide whether to handle it professionally or make it worse. She decided to exacerbate the situation. Carrington went to her phone from the locker room bench and wrote a message rather than waiting until after the game, taking time to consider the foul and how to address it, accepting responsibility, and moving forward professionally. White privilege is only 2 words. Carrington shared those 2 remarks on social media while the game was still in progress. Millions of people were still watching and talking about the foul, and her coaches and teammates were still on the floor. There was no background information, no justification, and no explanation of what she meant or was referring to.
Dijonai Carrington tweeted out white privilege from the locker room of a game that she was playing in. Get this. She fouls Sophie Cunningham hard. Sophie Cunningham, obviously a white person, fouls her hard. Flagrant 2, gets ejected, goes to the locker room and tweets out white privilege in the middle of the game.
The connotation was incendiary and instantaneous. Because Sophie Cunningham is white, the officials treated the foul differently due to racial bias, which is why she was called for a flagrant foul. However, it was not the case. The foul was called right away. The referees both had the same opinion. It was verified by the review. The call was accurate. However, Carrington has now brought race into an entirely basketball-related circumstance involving a poor, risky play that warranted a flagrant charge. The backlash was tremendous and happened very away. Overnight, the discourse changed. The foul was no longer a factor. Carrington's judgment was at issue. It has to do with her charge. It had to do with her assertion that an official call had been influenced by race. Prominent figures in the national media offered their opinions. Carrington's tweet sparked discussion among sports commentators who had no personal interest in the game. Responses to the narrative, which had changed from a harsh foul in a WNBA game to a player accusing referees of racial bias, were all negative.
You hit her in the head, you drew blood, you didn't connect with the ball at all whatsoever. So to me, it was just very ignorant and to some degree asinine by Dijonai Carrington to suggest that that call was based on white privilege.
Asinine and ignorant. When evaluating what Carrington had done, previous players and media figures used those terms. She had attempted to shift the blame by bringing up race in a scenario where she was obviously at fault and had committed an outrageous foul. People observed that she had weaponized a severe issue in order to avoid taking responsibility, and they didn't like it. The dialogue had lost its empathy. The story had completely changed. Carrington was not a player who had made a poor play, though. She was a player who had made a poor play, received fair punishment for it, and then made a worse choice by attempting to attribute a call that had nothing to do with race to racial bigotry. She was no longer the victim. The antagonist was her. Carrington's only option at this time was to remain mute, let the tale die, and go on. Rather, she made it worse several times over several days using various justifications. She first asserted that she had never stated that white privilege was the offense. She said that her post was being misunderstood. She asserted that her detractors lacked critical thinking abilities. I have never once asserted that white privilege was involved in the assessment of the foul. You assumed that. Try using your critical thinking abilities. I am aware that you studied psychology. She continued, citing her Stanford education as evidence that she was everything but naive on the subject. She had, however, posted about white privilege. She posted just that. There it was, the proof. The screenshot was all over the place. She was claiming she had never said it, but she was unable to unpost or unsay it. The initial transgression was being made worse by the dishonesty. She then attempted an alternative strategy. She cited her schooling. She brought up Stanford. She implied that those who doubted her intelligence were also ignorant. This was a terrible performance. It sounded patronizing. She seemed to be implying that her education at Stanford had given her a unique perspective that everyone else was unable to comprehend. With every explanation, the perception got worse. Every attempt to retract the tweet came across as less genuine. Every new explanation came across as more defensive. Fans, media figures, and the WNBA community watched things develop and grew more certain that Carrington wasn't accepting accountability. She was refusing to acknowledge that she had made a poor play and then decided to post about it. She was stepping up her efforts. She was protecting herself. Those who questioned her were being attacked by her. In the age of social media, careers are harmed in this way. Not because you made a single error, but rather because of how you handled it. Sophie Cunningham's reaction followed. The Fever player who was fouled is Sophie Cunningham. It was she who suffered the most. The extreme contact was experienced by her. She had every right to react defensively, emotionally, and violently. However, Sophie Cunningham managed it with absolute professionalism. I think the league is taking care of that. Race is unrelated to this. I was removed after a similar event last year, and I earned it. There's no need to discuss race at all. Carrington was not attacked by her. She didn't retaliate on social media. She made no attempt to defend why the foul was unfair or incorrect. She just gave the facts in a cool, collected manner. The league dealt with the foul. There is no justification for incorporating racial characteristics into a basketball play, and it has nothing to do with race. Carrington appeared even terrible in relation to that answer. Cunningham seemed calm, sensible, and rational. Carrington came out as unstable, defensive, and dishonest. This is very important. The contrast is important in circumstances such as these. Observers notice when one side handles a situation gracefully while the other side spirals out of control. They fiercely condemn the spiraling party because they recall that contrast. Carrington had completely lost the war on public relations. It wasn't because she had committed a blatant infraction. Everyone knew it was excessive, but rather because her reaction to the foul was worse than the foul itself. Brands are also keeping an eye on this. Carrington was not dropped by Reebok despite the obvious offense. Basketball players are expelled when they commit flagrant fouls. However, it is a liability for a player to make an excessive play, be called for it, and then use social media to bring up race in an otherwise irrelevant scenario. That's a player making bad decisions. That is an example of a player lacking emotional self-control. That's a performer who might act in a similar manner in the future, in front of the public and on social media, which would be detrimental to any brand connected to her. There are many more athletes that Reebok can support. There are options on Reebok. Why stay in touch with a player whose judgment is now openly questioned? Oh. In just 1 week, DJ Carrington's entire career began to go apart, and the craziest part is that she caused nearly all of the harm to herself.
Her endorsements are potentially about to pull out.
Because Carrington caused the majority of the harm to herself, this circumstance is cruel. Although the egregious foul was unacceptable, it only affected one game. Suspension, ejection, and maybe fines. There would have been individual repercussions. A one-game event became a career problem because of the tweet, the justifications, and the defensive stance. Additionally, there are rumors that Reebok is now searching for another partner. They're searching for someone like Caitlin Clark who has better judgment and a cleaner brand. Reebok is purportedly contemplating Caitlin Clark to replace Carrington, which is somewhat ironic. Carrington's teammates have harbored animosity toward this individual, who has been at the epicenter of the Indiana Fever's instability this season. The same team that both athletes play for. It makes sense from a business standpoint. In women's basketball, Clark is the biggest star. The biggest platform belongs to Clark. Clark is the center of attention. Naturally, Reebok would want to be linked to Clark, but this must hurt Carrington in a specific way. She's losing it to a teammate, not just a sponsorship. A player from her own team is outperforming her. She's witnessing the chance that could have been hers passed to someone else, someone she might not be close to, based on the dynamics of the locker room. In the age of social media, this is the price of bad decisions. You've lost more than just this week after one rash post, one defensive justification, and one attempt to shift the blame by bringing up race when it didn't matter. The rest of the WNBA is watching, taking notes, and realizing that in this day and age, off-court judgment is just as important as on-court performance. You've also learned a costly lesson about the power of a single social media post, damaging your reputation for years to come. What takes on between the lines is no longer the only aspect of the game. In the locker room, the game is also what you do with your phone, and Carrington recently discovered this in the most costly way imaginable.